Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu is a Ranker, and on this episode we are going to be discussing the discography of the Scottish rock band the Twilight Sad. The band formed in 2003 and was initially comprised of James Graham on vocals, Andy McFarlane on guitars and keys, Craig Orzo on bass and Mark Devine on drums. Over time the band lost their founding bassist and drummer and are currently operating as a five-piece, adding Johnny Docherty on bass, Brendan Smith on keys and Grant Hutchinson on drums. Over the course of the last 20 years, the Twilight Sad have released 5 studio albums and have garnered some substantial critical acclaim, but sadly have never really broken out of the underground. That said, they have cultivated and still maintain a stalwartly loyal cult following. And as for my own fandom, yeah, I like the Twilight Sad. I've actually been following the band since the release of their debut EP. But to be honest, I didn't quite realise just how much I liked the band until I made this episode and reflected upon their full body of work. So, without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. These are the studio albums of the Twilight Sad ranked from worst to best. So, we're going to be kicking off this list with No One Can Ever Know from 2012, which was the band's third LP. And here we find the band dramatically evolving, pivoting from the discordant raucous darkness of their second LP, Forget the Night Ahead, and into the sleek angular world of synthpop and new wave. The guitars are largely set aside here, or at least marginalised, and late 1980s style synthesizers take their place. But the band have still retained their sense of misery and gothic darkness. Thus, No One Can Ever Know comes across more like Joy Division's Closer or Depeche Mode's Music for the Masses, rather than Duran Duran or the Pet Shop Boys or any of the more commercial forms of synthpop that littered the late 80s and early 90s. And yeah, it's an interesting change for the Twilight Sad that works pretty well. The pristine nature of the synth work eliminates the more distortedly obtuse or ethereal elements of their first 2 records, which leaves No One Can Ever Know as arguably the most direct and accessible album in the band's discography. That said, it's not quite the best. By and large, this is a very strong album with a whole bunch of bangers on it, but there are 2 tracks here that do stall the engine for a spell. Don't Look at Me is a mildly catchy synthpop number that's ignorably pleasant, but is definitely one of the most disposable tunes in the band's catalogue. While Not Sleeping has a nicely maudlin atmosphere but kind of comes across as a less good version of Neil from earlier on the record. The fact that these 2 weaker tracks come back to back also doesn't really help. But those 2 minor blemishes aside, and we're on very good footing here. Alphabet kicks the record off with the brand new sound in full effect. The track's crystal clarity and icy synths setting it in a land miles away from anything the band had recorded before, while still somehow maintaining a comfortably familiar vibe. Sick is a beautiful and beautifully sad song about mortality and possibly dealing with cancer. As over a deeply morose composition that's flush with gorgeous folk guitar picking, James Graham cries, "Over the hill we go. You look so frail, you know, but still you hope." Don't Move brings on the shimmering synths and badass catchy vocal lines, especially the menacingly sinister repetition of "Paired off into violence, so we were paired off into violence." Neil feels like a sequel to the earlier Sick, full of images of death and possibly murder, while the arrangement sinks itself into a low tide of stark yet richly gothic minimalism. While Closer, Kill It in the Morning, is rad with its badass sci-fi siren opening and pulsing nighttime atmosphere. The track's dour yet grooving composition pulling easy Joy Division comparisons out of the darkness. So yeah, throw in the EDM tinged energy of Another Bed and the thumping pace and churning bass of Dead City into the mix, and you have a fantastic album that adds a successful synthpop feather to the Twilight Sad's artistic cap. 4 stars.
You look so frail, you know, but still you hold.
Next up we have 14 Autumns and 15 Winters from 2007, which was the band's debut LP. And this record caught a pretty big wave of critical acclaim upon release and gained the band an instant cult following. And it's easy to see why. The thunderously loud guitar work of Andy McFarlane and the tender lilting sadness and Scottish brogue of James Graham came together in a perfect way, serving up something that was as emotive as it was viscerally thrilling. A record to both wake up your neighbours and have a good old introverted mope along with. But this debut is actually the Twilight Sad's lightest record. Although the lyrics are as bleak and as morose as always, the musical compositions are actually a bit more upbeat and joyous than the rest of the band's output. The oppressive gothic darkness of the later albums is notably absent here, with the band leaning much more into dreamier shoegazy soundscapes, which in turn gives the record a nicely cathartic thrust. Highlights on an album that feels like a modern classic these days includes the opening Cold Days from the Birdhouse, which introduces the Twilight Sad with a beautiful bang. The track's country slide guitars and Graham's powerful emotive vocals setting something in motion that feels instantly special. The band's debut single, That Summer at Home I Had Become the Invisible Boy, is incredible. The track's cold bleak sadness, the lyrics about broken abusive homes, and the thunderous discordant guitar liftoff add up to something that's pretty breathtaking. Mwah! Chef's kiss, that song just blew me away the first time I heard it. Talking with Fireworks / Here It Never Snowed Then Afterwards It Did is also great, with James Graham's insanely hooky query lodging itself in your brain pan like an offensive weapon. Does your fear not grow when you see that you're all mine, with a knife in your chest? With a knife in your chest. Both that track and Walking for 2 hours use super heavy swells of guitar distortion and a great quiet loud dynamic to completely grab your attention. The deathly sad, mapped by what surrounded them, has a great moody glower to its walls of savagely heavy guitar, even as the lyrics dive into the painful world of grief that accompanies the dreaded loss of a child. While on the flip side, And She Would Darken the Memory is one of the band's lightest and catchiest tunes, the sing-along vocal lines housing a sting in the tail as Graham spits, "I'm putting up with your constant whine, and I won't last too long, friendly faces with put-on smiles." I feel like I want to play that song at every bullshit small talking party I ever attend. So yeah, 14 Autumns and 15 Winters is a fantastic album. The only reason it doesn't scale up any higher on this list is that a portion of the record, specifically the likes of Last Year's Rain Didn't Fall Quite So Hard and the closing instrumental title track, are more interested in creating atmospheric moods than something more direct and tangible. Those tunes are very successful in what they set out to do, it is just that I personally prefer the more direct material. Still, I'm picking at straws here. This is an absolutely magnificent LP and one hell of a debut. 4.5 stars. Next up we have It Won't Be Like This All the Time from 2019, which was the band's 5th LP and most recent to date. And here we find the band trying to capitalise on the boon of popularity that followed on from their support act slot with The Cure. Robert Smith had become a vocal supporter of the band, and the Twilight Sad were reaching more ears than ever before. To make the most of it, here the band turn in a more stadium-ready direction, putting together a fantastic set of catchy driving rock tunes and sweeping ballads, all shot through with a more mainstream production style than had ever been used before. And the resulting LP feels bigger in scale and more ready for mass consumption. And also, let's be fair, it sounds quite a bit like The Cure, with a new production style and epic stadium leanings prompting easy comparisons to the soundscapes found on Disintegration. And whilst It Won't Be Like This All the Time isn't as good as that all-time masterpiece, it's still absolutely brilliant, serving up a selection of tunes that see the band at their most communal and crowd-pleasing. The rather tasty closer, Videograms, is kind of like a microcosm of this and the record in general. It's an epic stadium rock ballad that has a sense of scale that dwarfs any other closing track by the band. It feels like it should be chanted at Wembley Stadium rather than sung quietly in a dark corner of your bedroom like most Twilight Sad tunes. But other highlights also abound. The perfumey arpeggiated guitars and rich balladry of The Arbor pull those easy Cure vibes out of the track's darkened hanging garden. 10 Reasons for Modern Drugs, meanwhile, is a fantastic overture, the track's darkly undulating synth swells rising with a dramatic tension. The likes of I'm Not Here, Missing Face and Girl Chewing Gum are great thumping rock tunes with instantly catchy vocal lines. I mean, who doesn't want to sing along with a chorus as badass as "Put me in the ground, I don't want to be here anymore. Org Machine is one of a few tunes that deals with the rank subject of domestic abuse, but the dark lyrics are reprieved by the hooky composition, which is kind of fucked up really. I mean, there's no way an emotionally brutal line like, "I can't believe you hit me, I've got nowhere to go" should be this so damn catchy. While VTR is amazing with its strident rock anthemics, cheeky Joy Division references via its percussion, and immediate sing-along vocals, as Graham begs his audience to join in and howl along together, and I won't be surprised if it kills us all. So yeah, there's not much to complain about at all on It Won't Be Like This All the Time. I think this is a superb LP of more mainstream sounding goth rock from the Twilight Sad. I guess it all comes down to preference in the end, but ultimately, as good as this album is, I still slightly prefer the records above it on this list. But this is still brilliant and easy proof that the Twilight Sad still have plenty of gas left in the tank. To be honest, I can't wait to see what they do next. 4.5 stars. Next up, and narrowly missing the top spot, we have Nobody Wants to Be Here and Nobody Wants to Leave from 2014, which was the band's fourth LP. And here we have the great victory lap from the Twilight Sad. This is the album that takes a moment to look back, rather than keep moving forward as every previous release by the band had done. Thus the band cherry-picked stylistic or sonic elements from their first three records and meld them together to create an LP that feels like the Twilight Sad delivering a kind of greatest hits best-of package. Adding to that feeling is the fact that the band have also gone out of their way to make this their most obviously accessible album. The entire record thrums with a catchy sing-along appeal, with each tune maintaining a kind of easy anthemic bent. And of course it's great, with highlight after highlight coming at you thick and fast. There's a Girl in the Corner gets things rolling with a great slice of vault rock that builds up into a crowd-pleasing fuzzing climax. Lead single, Last January, is excellent with its static synths, wintry bleakness, and anthemically rocking finale. It Never Was the Same is arguably the band's best ballad. Its swaying, slow-paced gothic crawl enlivened by a catchy chorus and a killer sing-along refrain of "We've fallen, we've fallen, we fall apart." Title track, Nobody Wants to Be Here and Nobody Wants to Leave, is a tender masterpiece. As over some grinding distortion, James Graham basically has an emotional breakdown into his microphone over a relationship that's splintering apart as he painfully sobs, "I don't know where it all went wrong." Mwah! Chef's kiss, that track is seriously beautiful. Pills I Swallow meanwhile comes to life brilliantly through its wailing backing vocals and ear-catching keyboard notes that cut through the track's gloom like rays of sun in a perpetually overcast sky. While Leave the House throws a feint and makes you think it's going to be a low minimalist piece, but then proceeds to hammer you over the head with some crazy catchy vocal hooks before blasting off into the stratosphere with an awesome rock out at the close. So yeah, add into that the catchy anthem, I Could Give You All That You Don't Want, and the brooding rock assault of In Nowheres, and you have an album that sees the Twilight Sad at their chest-beating best. In fact, it's only a couple of incremental nitpicks that keeps this record from topping this list. One of those is the fact that the closing piano dirge, Sometimes I Wish I Could Fall to Sleep, whilst good, sounds far too similar to At the Burnside, which is the closing track from their second LP. The other nitpick is that the track, Drown So I Can Watch, never really gets out of second gear and is comparatively quite flat. But still, those are very minor quibbles on what was my personal favourite 2014 album of the year. I think this LP is a masterpiece and one of the better post-punk albums of the last decade or so. Plus it contains a good portion of the band's best songs ever. 5 stars.
And lay with me alone and stay with me warm. And can we go by? And can we go by? And can we go by?
So here we are at the top of the mountain, and the Twilight Sad gold medal is going to go to Forget the Night Ahead from 2009, which was the band's second LP. And here we find the Twilight Sad moving away from the melodic shoegaze elements of their debut LP and taking a hard turn into dark gothic rock. And dark is very much the precise adjective here. Forget the Night Ahead is the sound of a band on a mission to alienate and disturb. A lot of these tracks are built on ugly walls of gnarled, distorted guitar. The melodies are almost always off-kilter and slightly strange, and the general mood of the album is oppressive and bleak. If It Won't Be Like This All the Time feels like the band's ode to The Cure's disintegration, then Forget the Night Ahead is their ode to The Cure's pornography. But even such intense dedication to darkness can't undo just how damn catchy James Graham's vocal lines are. He fills out the twisted wasteland of blackened misery with insane earwormy hooks that bury inside your skull like a flesh-eating disease. And it works like a treat, with every song on the album hitting a consistently high level of quality. This is an LP with exactly zero downtime, with each song kicking individual ass while also adding to the overall atmosphere. Reflection of the Television starts the record as it means to go on, with a howling distortion riff that immediately puts you in a dark place. But then the track nicely lightens up a fraction and proceeds to charge through a wicked post-punk anthem. Lead single I Became a Prostitute would almost be pretty with its giant effusive chorus, if it wasn't for the shrieking guitar thunder perpetually trying to drag it back over to the dark side. 7 Years of Letters, meanwhile, is one of a few more overtly commercial tunes on the record. It's straight ahead stomping balladry, adding a much needed touch of warmth. Even as James Graham menacingly warns, "We're on a hiding to nowhere." Likewise, the vaguely twee ballad The Room is absolutely gorgeous. Its simple yet relentless piano riff serving to heighten Graham's passionate vocal delivery, which is pretty spectacular. The likes of Interrupted and The Neighbours Can't Breathe turn on the rocking catchiness, but without ever losing that sense of darkness that pervades every corner of the record. But their late album energy is exactly the right tonal change-up at that point. While Floorboards Under the Bed is a startlingly dark yet unforgettable tune that starts with only James ominously intoning, "The boys throwing rocks off my face. The boys throwing rocks off my face," before ascending into a willfully sad gothic instrumental outro. I mean, it's fucking great. So yeah, add into that the shimmering rock of Made to Disappear, the fuzzingly bleak instrumental Scissors, the savagely heavy distortion assault of That Birthday Present, and the exceedingly morose closing piano dirge at the Burnside, and you have a pitch black yet pitch perfect post-punk masterpiece that sits as one of the darkest records of the last 15 years. And it's that really pungent dark atmosphere that helps see this particular album past the post. Well, that and the sequencing. I think this LP is perfect in that regard, knowing exactly when to step on the accelerator and when to pull back a bit. And this incrementally makes Forget the Night Ahead my personal favourite record by the Twilight Sad. 5 stars! So, now I've come to the end of my deep dive, the question remains: did I gain more appreciation for the artist? And well, I already gave that away during the intro. The answer is yes. I've always liked the Twilight Sad, but going through all their records in depth this week really deepened my love of them. They're a fantastic band with a flawless discography, and this past week has been an absolute treat. And that's my list. But of course, I know that's not your list, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me how you'd rank these records? Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.
There's a chance of a running scare.